The board meeting was about to decide the future of a $2 billion merger when my phone subtly vibrated on the mahogany table. I completely ignored it. Marcus Thompson didn't get sidetracked by notifications during negotiations that could multiply our revenue by 40%. The 15 executives around the table watched me as I analyzed the latest projected numbers on the screen, each of them depending on my decision to determine if their careers would advance or stagnate over the next 5 years. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. 35 years of life taught me that hesitation equals failure in the corporate world. While others wasted time on relationships and family obligations, I built an empire based on absolute focus and unwavering determination. My investment firm controlled portfolios that moved the East Coast economy, and my reputation in the financial market was synonymous with extraordinary results. The penthouse apartment in the Manhattan skyscraper perfectly mirrored my life philosophy. Every piece of furniture had a specific function. Every object was strategically placed to maximize efficiency. The glass walls offered a full view of the city that never sleeps, but I rarely took time to contemplate landscapes. Time was money, and money was power. My routine invariably started at 5 in the morning with strong black coffee and ended after midnight with reports that determined multi-million-dollar investments. Romantic relationships were unnecessary complications that hindered professional growth. Family represented responsibilities ambitious men like me couldn't afford to carry. Rebecca Martinez had been different from the other women who crossed my path. Our partnership started purely professionally when she was hired as a marketing consultant for our expansion into the Latin market. Her analytical ability was impressive, but it was her contagious laugh and her unique way of seeing opportunities that caught my attention beyond business. For a few months, Rebecca managed to break down the barriers I had built around my personal life. She'd make dinners at her cozy apartment while we discussed corporate strategies, but gradually our conversations evolved into more intimate topics. Rebecca talked about future plans, about building something lasting that transcended contracts and board meetings. The night that destroyed everything remains crystal clear in my memory. Rebecca had prepared a special meal, and during dessert, she started mentioning the possibility of expanding our partnership beyond the professional sphere. Her words about family and commitment sounded like alarms in my mind. I got up abruptly, adjusted my tie, and uttered the words that would haunt me for the next 4 years. "You're just a distraction, Rebecca. I don't need family. I need my career." I grabbed my coat and left the apartment without looking back, completely ignoring the muffled sobs echoing behind me. In the following days, Rebecca removed all her belongings from the office and completely disappeared from my professional and personal life. There were no calls, messages, or attempts at reconciliation. She simply evaporated as if our connection had never existed. The subsequent 4 years proved my decision had been correct. I closed record-breaking international deals, expanded into 3 new markets, and my personal fortune tripled. Major financial newspapers labeled me a visionary, while competitors studied my strategies, trying to decipher the secrets of my success. I had become exactly what I always aspired to be: untouchable, unstoppable, and completely independent. A typical Monday in October started like any other, with back-to-back meetings and multi-million-dollar decisions awaiting my approval. My assistant came in carrying the morning mail and placed a simple envelope on my desk. Unlike the usual corporate correspondence, this one had no elegant logo or sophisticated letterhead. Just my name, handwritten in a script I recognized instantly, even after 4 years of complete separation. I left the envelope on the desk for several hours, as if ignoring it could make Rebecca's memory disappear again. Between meetings and market analyses, my eyes constantly returned to that piece of paper that seemed to carry more weight than all the million-dollar contracts piled next to it. When I finally found the courage to open it, I found only a few lines written in the same delicate hand that used to jot down ideas during our old brainstorming sessions. "I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted you to know I'm doing well. We're doing well." The word "we" reverberated in my mind like a disturbing echo that refused to fade. Rebecca had become a ghost after our breakup, leaving no trace on social media or in professional circles we frequented together. I had never looked for information about her, convinced it was better to keep the past buried where it couldn't interfere with the present. That simple message shattered my focus for the rest of the week. During presentations to international investors, my mind wandered, trying to decipher the hidden meaning behind those seemingly innocent words. The plural pronoun constantly hammered in my thoughts, creating scenarios I refused to consciously consider. Rebecca had always been independent and determined, characteristics that initially attracted me before they became inconvenient for my life plans. The annual investment conference in Boston represented a crucial opportunity to expand our business into the international market. I had spent weeks preparing presentations that could result in multi-billion-dollar partnerships with European and Asian funds. At LaGuardia Airport, while waiting for my morning flight, I mentally reviewed the key points of my proposal when a familiar figure appeared in my peripheral vision. Rebecca was kneeling near the arrivals gate, chatting affectionately with two little girls who clung to her legs as if she were the center of their universe. My heart pounded in a way I hadn't experienced in years. The children couldn't have been more than 4 years old and had physical characteristics that made me wonder if I was hallucinating from overwork and lack of adequate sleep. Wavy brown hair fell over small shoulders, while intense blue eyes sparkled with the typical curiosity of childhood. They were exactly the same eyes that stared back at me in the mirror every morning, the same color my mother used to praise when I was a child. The resemblance was so striking that anyone could identify the genetic connection without needing lab tests. I walked towards them as if in a trance, each step heavier than the last. My rational mind tried to find alternative explanations, but my heart had already reached the obvious conclusion I refused to accept. Rebecca saw me approaching, and instantly her face lost all color, turning into a mask of maternal protection. She placed her hands on the girl's small shoulders in an instinctive gesture of defense. One of the girls gently tugged at Rebecca's dress hem and whispered with the innocence typical of her age, "Mommy, who's that tall man?" The question echoed in the noisy airport like it had been shouted through a megaphone. Rebecca hesitated for a few seconds that felt like an eternity, her eyes meeting mine in a silent exchange that communicated more than any conversation could express. "Are they mine?" I managed to ask, my voice choked, even though I already knew the answer that was emblazoned on their identical little faces. Rebecca nodded slowly, as if each movement required monumental effort. "Sophie and Grace," she murmured softly. "They turned 4 last month." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut, completely stealing my breath. For 4 whole years, while I built my financial empire and celebrated every corporate victory, 2 little people who carried half my genetic code grew up without knowing I existed. They had taken their first steps, spoken their first words, made their first drawings, and experienced their first discoveries about the world without me being present to witness any of those precious moments. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" I managed to articulate, my voice sounding strange even to myself. Rebecca stood up fully and looked at me with a complex mixture of deep sadness and unwavering maternal determination. "Because you made it extremely clear that family wasn't part of your life plans. I wasn't going to beg you to change your mind, or let them grow up feeling rejected by a father who considered them an obstacle to success." Her words hit me like consecutive physical blows, each syllable carrying the weight of 4 years of paternal absence. I looked at Sophie and Grace, who watched me with the natural curiosity of children facing situations they don't fully understand. For the first time in decades, I felt something I couldn't control, calculate, or negotiate, an instant and devastating love for 2 people I didn't even know properly, but who were unquestionably a part of me. The irony of the situation hit me with brutal force. I had spent years building a financial legacy that would be transferred to distant heirs or charities, while my true heirs grew up unaware they had a claim to the empire I carried alone for so long. Sophie timidly touched Rebecca's hand and whispered something I couldn't hear, but it made my ex-partner smile sadly. "Do they ask about their father?" I asked, fearing the answer, but needing to know the complete truth. Rebecca sighed deeply before answering. Occasionally. I always tell them their daddy works far away and can't visit them right now. They're too young to understand more complex concepts about adult relationships and life choices. The announcement of my flight echoed through the terminal, reminding me of the conference that could result in the largest expansion in my company's history. Boston awaited my presentation. International investors depended on my proposals, and my professional future was literally a few meters away at the boarding gate. But for the first time in decades, financial success seemed completely irrelevant compared to what was in front of me. Grace hid behind Rebecca's legs when our eyes met, but Sophie studied me with an intensity that reminded me of myself in important meetings. "He's handsome, Mommy," she commented innocently, making Rebecca blush slightly. "He has the same eyes as me and Grace." The keen observation of a 4-year-old summarized in a few words the truth I had ignored for years. I canceled the trip to Boston at that very moment. For the first time in my career, I called my assistant and instructed her to reschedule my entire week, transfer presentations to other executives, and cancel appointments that had been scheduled months in advance. The international investors would have to wait. My company would survive without my presence for a few days, but I couldn't live knowing I had discovered my daughters and simply boarded a plane for another business conference. Rebecca seemed genuinely surprised when I suggested we talk calmly somewhere more private. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the girls' small pink backpacks, and I realized she was just as shaken as I was by this unexpected encounter. We found a family-friendly coffee shop near the airport where Sophie and Grace could play in the children's area while we tried to process 4 years of absence and misunderstandings. The girls quickly adapted to the new environment, running among the colorful toys with the inexhaustible energy typical of childhood. Watching them play caused me a strange mixture of joy and deep regret. Sophie was clearly the more outgoing, leading imaginary games and giving instructions to Grace, who followed her with silent admiration. Grace preferred quieter activities, carefully drawing with crayons while humming invented melodies. "They're completely different from each other," Rebecca commented, following my gaze. "Sophie wants to be a lawyer, like the character in her favorite cartoon. Grace said she's going to be an artist and paint beautiful pictures to decorate our house." Every detail about their personalities fascinated me and simultaneously reminded me of everything I had lost during their first years of life. "How did you manage to raise 2 children alone?" I asked, genuinely curious about the practical challenges she had faced. Rebecca smiled with a mixture of pride and tiredness. "It wasn't easy, especially in the first few months when they woke up at alternate times during the night. I moved to a bigger apartment near my mom, who helps me during emergencies. I managed to work freelance to have flexible hours." I found out that Rebecca had given up professional opportunities to prioritize motherhood. She turned down job offers that would require constant travel or late hours, choosing smaller projects that allowed her to be present for all her daughter's important moments. "I don't regret any decision," she stated with conviction. "Sophie and Grace are my absolute priority. They needed stability and maternal presence, not an absent mother pursuing corporate ambitions." Her words contained an implicit criticism of my lifestyle, but I detected no bitterness in her voice. Rebecca had simply made different choices than mine, prioritizing relationships over professional achievements. While I accumulated awards and accolades from the financial industry, she collected children's drawings on the fridge and memories of first whispered words. "I want to be a part of their lives," I declared impulsively, surprising even myself with the determination in my voice. Rebecca studied me carefully, as if trying to determine if my intentions were genuine or just the result of an emotional moment that would quickly pass. "Marcus, they don't know you. You can't just show up and expect them to instantly accept you as a father figure." She was right, of course. I was a complete stranger to Sophie and Grace, just a tall man who had interrupted their day at the airport with strange questions. Building a relationship with them would require time, patience, and consistency, qualities I had rarely demonstrated in personal relationships. My usual approach of solving problems through quick decisions and immediate implementation wouldn't work with 4-year-old children. Then teach me, I asked humbly. Tell me how I can start being the father they deserve. Rebecca hesitated for a long moment, watching the girls who had discovered a box of puzzles and were working together to assemble a picture of colorful butterflies. It would be a gradual process. Supervised visits initially, maybe a few hours a week. They'd need to get used to your presence before anything more significant. The idea of following a controlled schedule to get to know my own daughters frustrated me deeply. But I understood the need to protect their emotional well-being. Sophie and Grace had built a stable life with Rebecca, and my sudden entry could cause unnecessary confusion or anxiety. They deserved a careful transition that respected their feelings and established routine. "Can I start this weekend?" I suggested eagerly. Rebecca laughed softly, shaking her head. "You haven't changed at all, Marcus. You still want definite schedules and immediate results." Her observation made me realize I'd need to completely rethink my approach to fatherhood. Children didn't operate according to business plans or quarterly goals. At that moment, Sophie ran to our table, proudly holding the completed puzzle. "Look, Mommy, Grace and I finished!" She included me in the celebration, without hesitation, showing me the picture of the butterflies as if I were a natural part of the family. "It's very beautiful," I replied sincerely, impressed by the coordination needed to complete a relatively complex puzzle. "Do you want to play with us?" Grace asked shyly, appearing beside her sister. It was the first time she had spoken directly to me, and her sweet voice carried genuine curiosity. I looked at Rebecca, who nodded with an encouraging smile. "I'd love to play with you," I replied, standing up to join them in the children's area. The next 30 minutes were revealing in ways I never could have anticipated. Sophie challenged me to a memory game, where she clearly had an advantage due to constant practice, while Grace taught me how to color within the lines without smudging the drawings. Their spontaneous laughter and innocent comments made me laugh in a way I hadn't experienced in years. "You laugh like Grace," Sophie observed keenly. "And you have the same freckles on your nose that Mommy said I have." Every physical resemblance she identified strengthened the connection between us, building natural bridges that no lawyer or contract could establish. Grace came closer and delicately touched my hand, comparing the size of our fingers. "Your hands are huge," she giggled, "but they're soft like Mommy's." When it was time to say goodbye, I felt a physical reluctance to let them leave. Sophie hugged me spontaneously, while Grace waved shyly from a distance. Rebecca handed me a card with her new phone number. "Call me when you want to talk about the next steps," she said softly. "But remember, this isn't about you making up for lost time. It's about building something new for their future." Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to get access to more stories like this. I returned to my apartment in Manhattan completely transformed. The glass walls that once symbolized my success now seemed cold and impersonal. For the first time, I imagined what it would be like to have children's drawings taped to the pristine surfaces, toys scattered in the organized corners, and joyful voices echoing through the silent hallways. My life had been redefined in a single afternoon, and I could barely wait to discover what kind of father I could become.